In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, peace be upon you, welcome back to my YouTube channel. So students, today we are going to start with ADNOC's WMS, which is also known as the ADNOC Work Management System. We will discuss all its modules in detail. And today we will begin with Module 1 of WMS. In the next slide, in the introduction, first we will discuss a Q&A. Then our paper will come, and the full scope of WMS will come. Next, we will talk about the roles and responsibilities of the authorities and personnel within it. What are their roles and responsibilities? And the alignment of the health, safety and environment management system within the framework. What will be the interface for the stakeholders within it, who may be your ad hoc employees, contractors and subcontractors? What will be the implementation of the agreed upon things, who are your FREJs? And what will be the continuous improvement if any of your subcontractors import something from the ad hoc in-house during job execution? How this will be recorded for improvement? All these things will be discussed on the initial basis with us. Let's talk about the work management system as a safety tool. It is indeed a safety tool to ensure that the work is properly controlled. It will ensure that the work being done is well coordinated and communicated effectively. Everyone should be clear about what work needs to be done, what safety measures need to be followed, what hazards exist, and how to control them. All these aspects should be properly communicated and coordinated. Communication should be coordinated. After that, if we talk about the modules of WMS, then first of all, after the framework, we will talk about our formal risk assessment, in which we will create two types, such as level 1 and level 2. What level will be there for what work? We will discuss it later. After that, energy isolation. What type of energy isolation will there be? Who will issue the certificate and for how long will the certificate remain valid? Then, the permit to work procedure. Who will request the permit? Who will approve the permit? Who will issue the permit? What will be the role of the GP? Then, we will go into this module and discuss all the details in detail. Next, we will discuss temporary defeat, what it is and under what conditions it is required. After that, the final topic will be simultaneous operations. What are simultaneous operations? And if we need to conduct them, how will we do it? Who will manage it? Who will have the authority? And who will approve it? We will discuss all these aspects in detail as we move forward. Now, what are the objectives of the framework of WMS? First of all, one set of system procedures for ADNOC Group companies. As you know, there are many companies in the ADNOC Group, and they may have different locations. So, a single system was needed for all these companies. So, our requirement has been completed with the WMS framework, that now, wherever the company is working within the ADNOC, whether it is onshore or offshore, the same procedure, the same work framework is followed. The work management system, which we call ADNOC WMS, is what follows, which is to harmonize. Terminologies, whatever the system, all of them, should be in harmony with each other. Within all departments, all their subsidiaries, all companies, there should be an understanding with each other so that things can be communicated better, things can be coordinated better. After that, the next thing will come, that the process of communication and enforcing the lessons learned across the organization becomes simplified and effective. Now, if we change anything in WMS, then all the companies within ADNOC will have to change things in the WMS that is being used at all their locations. If we have to learn any lessons, then its communication will become quite easy. So this is one of the two best objectives of the WMS framework. What is next for the familiarity of two contractors on a single system working across ADNOC companies? The contractors who are working with ADNOC, the subcontractors, if they work at one location for a year, then they go to another location, then there is an extra increase for them to implement the new system on themselves or learn the new system. There will be an extra cost for it and there will be extra time. So all the contractors of ADNOC who are subcontractors, for them, it has become quite easy in this matter, that if they are working with Ed now, they will work at any location and will follow the WMH framework. So if they have been trained once, then the contractor or subcontractor will not have to bear the training cost again. And things are better understandable for them, so they can handle things well. What is the difference between the core personnel of ADNOC and the core personnel of ADNOC? It has become easy because if let's suppose you generate an idea in WMS, the same idea will work everywhere. onshore and offshore if you have stored any data in it. What this means is that you can access it from anywhere within ADNOC. There used to be many limitations that we referred to as system errors or system limitations. However, with the introduction of the ADNOC WMS framework, these issues have been resolved and limited. These were some of the objectives of the WMS. WMS framework is its purpose. So its purpose is to define the structure of WMS work system, which takes into account of its components. The structure of creating the entire structure of WMS has facilitation and continuous improvement within it. Whenever you are doing any work within ADNOC, within this group of companies, all its components will be decided and discussed within this framework. That means all your elements related to WMatch, all your input documentation, all those things will be totally told to you in the framework as to what things can be covered in it. After that, the WMS framework stands alone to provide details on the governor's requirements of WMS elements. After this, all the details will be provided to you in the WMS framework by going to further elements in further modules, that whenever you do any work in ADNOC company related to WMS, what documentation will you require, and you will have the total procedure to get the documentation. After this, if we talk about the scope of the WMH framework says that this document shall be applicable to all ADNOC group of companies, employees, contractors, facilities including interface, area, activities and services without exception. The WM framework of ADN is to be implemented without fail for all the companies, all the employees and all the contractors. Contractors will be responsible for ensuring that all activities performed within ADNOC's operational facilities are carried out in accordance with their contractual requirements and for managing records in line with the requirements of this document. This means that whichever contractor ADNOC has, it will be his responsibility. Whatever activity he is doing in ADNOC, he will fill up all the records which are in the grid within WMS, which is the WMS system, and the things that are there in its contracts. By following all the guidelines and implementing them, ADNOC will start this work, and anyone working in any ADNOC company will be obligated to adhere to the defined roles and responsibilities. What are the roles and responsibilities of your personnel who are on WMS? So the first role we have is the ADNOC Group H Senior Vice President, whose responsibilities will be to review and approve WMS standards and revisions. When WMS standards are created, approval is by the Senior Vice President of HSE at ADNOC Group. Any revisions after a year, 2 years, or due to events also require their approval. They ensure Tier 3 audits for WMS are conducted. What is a Tier 3 audit? We will discuss that shortly, but conducting it is ADNOC Group HSE-SP's responsibility. After audits or changes in requirements, necessary changes need review and approval. What's a Tier 3 audit? We'll cover this in slides, but conducting the Tier 3 audit is ADNOC Group HSE-SP's responsibility. If audits are done or requirements change, necessary changes need review and approval. This is the Senior VP of HSE's responsibility. Once standards are approved, every ADNOC Group company must have updated standards with signatures. They must implement the system, viewing and approving them. This responsibility will remain with the Senior Vice President of ADNOC Group H. When all the standards are approved, it is the responsibility of each company of ADNOC Group to ensure that they have up-to-date approvals. That standards, that WMS framework with 3 signatures should be available, and that the same system should be implemented. What will be the role and responsibility of the personnel? First of all, let's talk about the CEO of the group company. It will be his responsibility to appoint the asset owner from all the respective site facilities for all the companies we have, for all the plants and sites we have. Appoint who will be the asset owner for each entity, each company, each site. Appointing an asset owner will be the responsibility of the group company's CEO. We will discuss VP HSE responsibilities. Firstly, provide advice on WMS standards. VP HSE provides WMS standards, info, guidelines and facilitation. They also conduct Tier 2 audits. If you need any guidelines or facilitation, it is the responsibility of the group company VPH to provide it. Then, conduct the Tier 2 order. What is Tier 2 audit? Tier 2 audit of WMS is VPHC's responsibility. Endorsing deviation request from WMS standards is a prime responsibility. Deviation requests must be official and are a VPHC responsibility. The endorsement request for required deviations from the WMS standards. If we need any deviation from the WMS standards, the request for that, which must be a properly official request, will also be the responsibility of the group company VPHSE. Requirements of our group company VPH. This is part of their job responsibilities. Our group company VPO, which we refer to as the asset owner, has specific roles and responsibilities as per the ADNOC WMS. First and foremost, the responsibility will be to ensure effective implementation and compliance with the work management system, ensuring that the standard operating procedures (SOPs) are fully implemented and compliance is maintained as per the approved plan. After that, it is essential to ensure that there is sufficient manpower. The company should have a training program in place, and all workforce involved in any task must be competent according to their job descriptions, possessing adequate knowledge and experience. They should be provided with training before they are allowed to work. Next, appoint a person in writing who will have the area authority for a project or site. The third person, whom we will call the asset area authority, must also be appointed as part of the asset owner's responsibilities. This is included in the asset owner's role. Following this, we have to ensure the planning and administration of WMS is properly coordinated. This means that the planning you have done must be executed with full coordination at every stage. Without coordination and proper communication, you will not be able to work safely while following procedures. In the WMS framework, the first component we will discuss is the components of the work management system. We will focus on all these aspects first. Then we will move on to HSEMS, which stands for Health, Safety, and Environment Management System. Next will be the stakeholder interface, discussing how stakeholders can interface in this process. After that, we will facilitate implementation, followed by continuous improvement. If we encounter any drawbacks or learn lessons from our work, we will share these with all stakeholders, group companies, or contractors, so that when we perform the same activity next time, we can improve and complete our activities in a better and safer way. Finally, we will discuss the custodianship within the work management system, focusing on the roles and responsibilities of the asset owners and area authorities of all the group companies. Today we'll discuss the WMS components in our WMS. The WMS has 8 steps integrating 5 elements, including permit to work, job safety analysis, energy isolation, temporary defeat, and SIMOPS. We'll cover everything from work planning to executing and closing the permit. The first element is work request and planning. All 5 elements will be covered. For example, permanent to work program will be covered. Job safety analysis will also be covered. Energy isolation will also be covered. Temporary defeat and CMOBs. We will cover everything from work planning to execution and permit closure. First, we discuss work request and planning, determining what work is needed, where, and in which area. For equipment, we define the job scope. This total planning is the first element of WMS. After planning, we identify and approve controls. Where it needs to be done, in which area it needs to be done, and if we are working on any equipment, what will the job scope be? Specifically, what work do we need to do on that equipment? This means that the total planning of the work will be discussed or set in the first element of WMS, which is work request and planning. Once we have completed the work planning, the next element will be identifying and approving controls. We need to determine what controls we need to manage in order to execute this work. Controls needed for task execution and isolation requirements must be identified and approved. Electric controls need approval from the electric department and process control from the shift controller or process area manager. Ensure control measures are in place before proceeding. After planning and identifying controls, site controls and implementation will be covered. Check area, classification, red, amber or green zones. Additional, the process controller from your department has to get it approved by the shift controller or whoever your process area manager is, so that we can do this work, so we can control it. We need measures for safe completion of our work. Next is site controls and implementation. First, check area classification: red, amber, green zones. Additional controls may be needed. Check crane safety if entering. High fire risk needs hot or critical work permit. Mayors will have to implement on-site controls. After that, if a crane is coming into our area, we need to check whether this crane is safe for our work area or not. If there is a high chance of fire and explosion in our area, we will need a hot work permit, or we can work under a critical work permit. We will discuss all these things in the next few elements. When we have done a detailed study of all the three elements of our duty, we will ensure that things are in order. After that, we will have an authorized work permit. What is a work permit? You have a return authorization that allows you to go to any area and use specific work equipment. That allows you to go into any area and work on specific equipment. A return authorization means that you can go into any area and work on specific work equipment. But for that, we need an authorized work permit, an approved and valid work permit. This will ensure that all aspects are covered, such as which tools we can use, what our job scope will be, what competency level is required, how many people can be involved in this work, which JSA will apply, and according to which work scope we need to operate. Once we have received the work permit, before starting work, all of the agreed control measures that are included in your work permit will remain at level 1 for your general work permit, and for critical or hazardous work, your risk assessment will be at level 2 for the job safety analysis, according to whatever agreed control measures are in place. Their communication. In addition to the communication of your work package, all of your workforce, that will be discussed. We will study this by going into the communication and control element. Before starting work, we need to visit the site and conduct a dynamic risk assessment near the equipment. This helps identify any missed or new risks since our last assessment. We must control these risks before proceeding. After completing this assessment and implementing control measures, we will begin work and address the next element. At that time, we did not have this additional provision. So how do we control this now? Before starting the risk assessment work, we have to go to the working area at the working location and do a dynamic risk assessment. We have done a risk assessment on the current condition, and only after that we have to start the work by implementing all the control measures. When we have to start the work, the next element will come to us: work, handover, suspension, and extension. It will be the responsibility of the entire team as well as the job performer to ensure that the work is completed in a safe way. If the work is completed, then its proper handover hour is in a safe way. If the work goes into your next shift, then your permit. The permit should be suspended, so that the next job performer can reactivate their permit. However, if you need extra time for your work after some time, then you need to know how to properly extend the permit. We will discuss all these aspects in the next element. When your job is completed, meaning your work is finished, we reach the final step, which is our last element, permit closure, and handback, or what we call permit closure, or handover. In this, you need to ensure that any agreed job is properly completed in a safe manner. Additionally, the housekeeping of the area must also be taken care of. All those should be completed properly, and the isolation we implemented should be de-isolated in the correct sequence, according to the accurate isolation list. This should be done. You should refer to the agreed isolation list. We will look at the structure of ADNOC's Health and Safety Environment Management System. So first we have level 1, which will include values and intents. What is the company's vision? What mission is the company working according to? What things has the company valued? After that, what is the policy statement and what are the objectives? When we talk about HS, the main objective of HSSE is 100% HS compliance. This means that you have to comply with all the rules and regulations related to HSSE. You have to comply with all the documents and set standards 100%, not even a 0.1% relaxation is given in that. After this, we will get level 2, in which you will have all the standards as to which focus area we have. The most important thing you have is area classification: red zone, amber zone, green zone. According to these classifications, all the requirements will change. After that, the governors will set the standards for occupational, health, environmental, risk management, and all the other things that will come under Level 2. We will also keep providing an overview of all the applicable standards related to these things. After this, we will have Level 3, which will include all the recommended practices and guidelines. How do you need to work on the standards? From now on, the life-saving rules require you to complete high-risk activities while following the SOP. Life-saving rules, all the requirements for that, will be studied at Level 3. Level 4 will include operational documents, the procedures of the ADNOC group of companies. The same procedures will be used across all entities in the joint ventures, working with the ADNOC group of companies and WMS. What will your reporting procedure be? What will your 1,000 observations be? What is your incident investigation procedure? How will your documentation be done? On what basis will your Tier 1, 2, or 3 audits be conducted? We will be able to take all the details of this from Level 4 of the Health and Safety Management System, which includes operational documents, to get the guidelines. The last point of the Health and Safety Environment Management structure is the last level is evidence and results for audit and review purposes. So what will happen? All of our records can be leading or lagging indicators. We need to provide records only on their approved forms. Your daily WMS audit is there, your lock sheet is there, and there can be focus inspections. You can have your monthly reports. Whatever things there are, we will go by the approved forms of ADNOC. Who can be the stakeholders in the WMS framework? The first person we will come across is the ADNOC group, company and its employees. All the companies in the ADNOC group are ADNOC GESCO. Wherever they are ADCO. All companies will be stakeholders. Users of WMS standards ensure work meets standards. Contractors and third parties are hired for tasks or projects. We hire experts for these tasks. Those who are following the standard will be responsible for managing, planning, supervising, and executing the work. All those people will be responsible for ensuring that whatever work is properly managed, planned, and supervised as per the ad hoc standard. In ad hoc facilities, next comes contractors and third parties. Now, who are the contractors who are hired for any specific work? Mostly, we have a project or we have construction work or sheet down turnaround activities. So for them, we hire experts who are experts in our work. So they will remain contractors with us. A contract has been signed with them for some work. On this basis, they are coming to work in ADNOC premises. So all these things will be applicable to them as well. They have to follow the rules and regulations that are in ADNOC's work management system. The same rules will also apply to subcontractors without direct ADNOC link. They work under contractor agreements and all regulations apply. They must follow all rules. Finally, regulators are stakeholders. Regulators may relate to government, telecom, healthcare, or banking. If sector reps visit ADNOC for assignments, they must adhere to WMS principles. Next, we have the third stakeholder, the regulators. Regulators are related to government affairs, government jobs, telecommunications, healthcare, and the banking sector. We might have representatives from ATMs or the food chain. If any of their representatives or employees visit the ADNOC premises, they must follow all the rules and regulations of the WMS framework. Who are our stakeholders? They are the direct employees of ADNOC, our contractors, our subcontractors, and our regulators. Will come for some assignment. So, it will also be mandatory for them to follow all the rules and regulations in the WMS framework. Therefore, our stakeholders include the direct employees of ADNOC, our contractors, our subcontractors, and our regulators. First, let's talk about our WMS framework. The principal custodian of the WMS framework is our ADNOC, Senior Vice President of HSE. What responsibilities are included in their role? The Senior Vice President of HSE has the authority to authorize all changes to the WMS framework. If there is a need to make any changes in the WMS, whether it's adding something new or removing something, the approval for all of that lies with the Senior Vice President of HSE. After that, we have facilitating the development of the WMS framework. Whenever there are improvements coming from your research and development, those need to be updated in your framework and standards for continuous improvement. If there are some improvements coming after your research and development, then updating that within your framework is essential for continuous improvement, coordination across all the ADNOC group of companies. Once you've identified areas for improvement, it should be shared within all the companies, ensuring that our revised procedures and updates are consistently used across the ADNOC group. This is to ensure that the effective implementation of the approved or revised WMS framework is happening. If we need to deviate from the WMS tenders, we need to have procedures in place for that. So first of all, we see that maybe warrant. In special circumstances, stars, if we have some such circumstances, then you will be given working in that. But the safety of the personnel, who are your people, and after that, the protection of the environment, which is your environment, and assets must also note the geo price, which means the safety of your environment and your people will never be ignored. So if you encounter a condition where you cannot operate under the WMS framework, or if the conditions are not clear within the WMS framework, then in such cases, you need to perform a dedicated risk assessment. You should conduct a dynamic risk assessment or to evaluate the risks involved in that work, identify the control measures, and determine what control measures you can implement. To reduce that risk, we need to determine how much we should lower it, which we refer to as allowable risk. S low, S reasonable, practicable. So what it means is that if we have to do any work which is not clear in the WMS framework, then for that we will have to summarize the dynamic. And only after considering all its factors, we will be able to start that work. That if we have to make any deviation from the WMH framework, then how will we manage that? So the first point is that the asset owner will request a deviation from the WMS standard. Along with the risk assessment, which you will have supported with a dynamic risk assessment, the asset owner will submit this request to the group company's corporate HS vice president along with the return risk assessment. The first step for the group company corporate HS vice president will be this. What will happen next is the group company corporate HS vice president share it with the ADNOC group HS. If we have some areas for improvement in the review, then we should get that thing implemented also. Some external or additional controls may also be added. After the review, that can also be added once all the revisions are approved. Then the deviation from the WMS standards will also be approved by the Senior Vice President of HS. The person in charge will approve it. And after that, you can proceed with the activity that was not covered under your WMS framework or required deviation. Only after approval can you continue this work. You can only proceed after getting the approval. After work approval, you can continue for this job. Application of stricter standards and requirements means that if we have to structure the requirements or standards, we have to strengthen them. Then what should be our requirements for them? The first point will be that WMS standards set out minimum guidelines that must be followed across all group companies. In requirements are minimum guidelines for adding control measures, dynamic risk assessment, and deviations from WMS framework as needed. Minimum guidelines must be strictly followed. So the word minimum guidelines is used because the minimum guidelines have been set for those who are standards, and they have to be strictly followed in all education group compliance. Next comes the second point, that the Edge Group Company Reserve is directed to enforce the structural guidelines. Every company that is a group company, whether it is ADNOC or gas company, has the duty to strictly follow its own rules and regulations. All approved deviations will be approved, after which additional shell will be issued by the SVP. Tabulated in deviation additional to WMS standards approved. Add to the guidelines minimum guidelines. That should be part of your procedure. How to implement the WMS framework in emergency conditions or follow it. Emergency deviation of WMS standards are permitted. If deviation is needed, work apart from them. How will we implement it or how will we follow it? Emergency deviations from WMS standards are permitted. If you need to deviate from your standards or framework during an emergency, you can do so. Personal and property protection measures will be in place. Your people, environment, and property will not be compromised. When the emergency is under control and normal conditions return, follow all WMS standards. Your people, environment, and property will not be compromised. When the emergency is under control and normal conditions return, follow all WMS standards. when conditions return to normal, follow all WMS standards. When your condition returns to normal, you must follow all the procedures and requirements of the WMS standard profit procedures. In emergency conditions, the permit we have with the GP should be live on the device, and there should also be a hard copy. But in emergency conditions, you can work and give guidance just by watching it live on the device. Apart from that, if we talk about emergency conditions in which we had to impose some isolation, ISA imposed physical isolation and demonstrated it. But after that, until the isolation certificate is signed, we cannot continue working in a normal atmosphere or under normal conditions. We cannot go ahead. However, in emergency conditions, the ISO was there and it provided you with physical. In an emergency condition, if the IS was there and they provided you with a physical demonstration and verified the evaluation, then we won't wait for the paper to be signed. To control the emergency and overcome it, we will continue our work. The NPR note for any change, implementation during the emergency must be recorded and approved as a deviation. So whatever work we did in the case of an emergency, the changes we made or the procedures we bypassed will be reassessed once things return to normal after the emergency. If they are saved to class, then we will upload them in Deviation and make them part. We will make it a part of our library. Otherwise, those things are in emergency 3 in normal atmosphere. In normal conditions, we do not have to implement. Those things which are document retention, the documents which you have to hold, save or store, you have to do it for minimum 12 months. That means in what conditions you have to keep all the documents saved with you for 1 year. So the first condition is that the form paper-based system, which is your paper base, all your documents permits, they will be accepted apart from your e-permit. The original copy of the signed documentation is the original hard copy of the document that has been signed, along with all the relevant attachments, including any certificates that go with it. Attachments are required as per WMS standards. You need to store and save all these signed copies and all your actual certificates for 1 year. Its subsequent father companies are neutralizing electronic systems. Other hard copy containing weight in signatures. Additionally, if there are any copies where you have made manual signatures apart from your electronic signatures, and if the information is not captured in the electronic system, or if there is some information that has been written down that is not in your WMS online device, and you have made additional notes there, then such documents must be retained for a minimum period of 12 months. You need to hold, save, or store all these types of documents for 1 year. So to repeat, all your paper-based permits where you have actual signatures, along with all the certificates related to them, must be kept. Additionally, any certificate where you have made manual signatures or where you have rewritten some information must also be retained for 1 year. This includes training and competency assurance. Anyone related to WMS who has worked on WMS or is a stakeholder in any way must be competent and should have training, knowledge, and experience. So, who will ensure this? The first point is that the asset owner, Nina, is formally responsible for appointing a competent WMS signature, and the person must have the necessary qualifications. The training for WMS must be successfully completed, first along with the assessment. After that, there should be a panel assessment and an interview where they will clear, pass, and get approved.
They will be aired, they will be passed, they will be approved. Only those people like VMS signatories or VMS store officers, your issuing authority, your permit receiver, or whoever they will be able to work. The second point comes, the details of the personnel successfully completing the formal program shall be entered in the authorization and training database. So whoever has undergone the training, which is the approved training, which I am telling you in Urdu and Hindi, those who have completed this training will be able to do it. After completing steps and clearing the interview, they will get IDs. Their training database will show training completed in February 2023. How long is this training valid, when to retrain, and what are their login ID and registration number. The training certificate required by WMS standards is valid for 3 years and needs a refresher course afterwards. The certificate is valid for 3 years after the approved training record, and after 3 years, a refresher course is needed. The training certificate required by WMS standards is valid for 3 years and needs a refresher course afterwards. The certificate issued after the approved training record is valid for 3 years, and after 3 years, a refresher course is required, and shall require a refresher course post-expiration. The certificate will be valid for 3 years after approving the training record as per WMS, and after the 3-year period is over, you will have to do a refresher course. How can we improve the standards in our framework that we have identified? Identifying gaps and aligning improvement opportunities is crucial for achieving outcomes. These opportunities enhance our framework and standards. Meeting WMS standards requires periodic reviews, set fixed review times post-period, assess unlearned lessons, improvements, and glitches. Certificates should be live if permits are live, but certificates aren't. Why? If we achieve all those things, then we will be able to take our required result from our WMS framework standard. What will be required for this? The first point is the potential source of improvement opportunities include which are the potential sources for improvement. Periodic review of WMS standards. Periodic review of WMS standards after a fixed time whenever the period is complete. So, we need to review what we haven't learned, what lessons we had, what areas for improvement we identified, where we encountered glitches, and what we need to improve. If our certificates are supposed to be live, but the permit is going live, what could be the reason? If our permits are live, but the certificates are not. The next question is about the incorporation of the results of the review. Analysis on the HSE performance lessons learned during the W implementation. This means what conclusions we have drawn from our review, what outputs we have obtained from it, and then analyzing the HSE performance to see how much health, safety, and environment have improved as a result. After that, based on the lessons learned during the WMS implementation, during the implementation of WMS, we learned lessons based on the lessons learned during the WMS implementation, we will review what continuous improvements we can make and then at the very end, we will discuss audits. As we mentioned in the starting slide, there are 3 types of audits for WMS: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. We will go into detail about these audits in the next slide. Audits are a key point for us. They present a key opportunity to measure the performance of any standard or framework, and we can identify the gaps for improvement. What types of audits are there in WMS? What will be the frequency of these audits? And who has to perform the audit? So, first of all, we have the audit type Tier 1. This will be daily individual permits or other. This will be done by anyone who is involved in any way in the individual daily basis permit. They will conduct a self-audit or on their daily basis. This is done individually for each permit on the daily basis. And it is verified. A Tier 2 annual audit program will assess WMS standards effectiveness by corporate HSE personnel or leadership. Your area's HSE team or appointed person will conduct the audit to check WMS compliance percentage. The HSE team in your area can also conduct the audit, or any responsible person appointed from the ad hoc group of companies will come and perform your annual audit to check how much compliance we have with the WMS framework or standards. If our non-compliance is highlighted somewhere, or we have some areas for improvement or to put us eyes on that should also be identified by the HSR team or leadership within the ADNOC group of companies. After that, there will be a Tier 3 independent as specified by ADNOC. Audit guidelines. Independent means a third party who does not have a direct relationship with you. If the ADNOC is not a NAPA, then whatever is apropos, I will sleep. Audit firms will ensure WMS compliance. We will discuss responsible parties next. Please subscribe and click the bell for updates. Share this video with friends interested in the ad hoc work management system in Hindi or Urdu. Ask questions in the comments. First, I will do the clay in the channel so that you can wear the notification of the videos of the master. Please share the link to this video with all your friends who want to understand the ad hoc work management system in Hindi or Urdu. If you have any questions related to this video, feel free to ask me in the comment box.